Hello, podcast listener. Today's episode of JJ Meets World features a television personality, radio personality, a paraprofessional substitute for Fargo Public Schools, and all-around encyclopedia of knowledge, Mr. Steve Poitras. We go everywhere in this conversation, so if you're looking for something that hits right here, right there, and everywhere in between, this is the podcast for you. But first, a quick word from our sponsor. This episode of JJ Meets World is brought to you by Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. Natalie has a proven track record to get your home sold faster and for more money. She is consistently focused on her clients' needs and wants throughout the entire process and make sure that they are well taken care of. If you're looking to buy or sell, reach out to Natalie today. On average, Natalie sells a home every 3.74 days. That's at least 2 a week. And last year, Natalie earned her clients on average over $4,000 above list price on their homes. And you don't have to take our word for it. Here's some of the great reviews Natalie has received. I was overwhelmingly impressed with Natalie and all the Hatch team. She was very responsive and responded to all of the emails within an hour. She gave great advice and encouragement from the listing and pictures, the offer, and all the closing details. The marketing team knew exactly how to promote my property, and I was pleased by how soon and easily my property received an offer. I was actually dreading selling my condo, and Natalie did such an awesome job that I felt like I really didn't need to do anything. The thing I most appreciated was that she really listened to what I wanted to do and respected my decisions. I would definitely recommend Natalie and all the Hatch Realty team. They made this process so wonderful. That was from Diane. So listen, if you're in the mood to buy or sell a home, give Natalie a call right now. You can reach her at 701-388-9338. Natalie, Natalie, at hatchrealtyfm.com, or you can go to livefargomorehead.com. That's livefargomorehead.com and find out some information. Huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring JJ Meets World.
1, 2, 3, 4. JJ Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. JJ has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirls as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called JJ Meets World.
I've been physically attracted to 2 different mice in my life. One is Gadget from the Chippendales Rescue Rangers, and the other is, I don't even know her name, but she was the mouse cheerleader at Chuck E. Cheese. Or it may have been Showbiz.
That was a bird.
What? No, there's a mouse. There's another Showbiz then, because there's a mouse. Whichever one was the mouse, right?
Because when it became Chuck E. Cheese,
it became a bird, right?
I think she was always a bird.
I'm pretty sure she was like it must have been when it was Showbiz, because then she wouldn't be competing with the Cheese Man mouse.
Not that the bird mice distinction really matters.
It does. Because she was a peppy cheerleader mouse. I'm positive the Rockabilly explosion, or Rockafire explosion was a mouse. And then they had there was a dog who was the Matthew McConaughey of dogs, and he would sit on a surfboard, but he played a guitar maybe. But I remember being very attracted to both of those anthropomorphic mice, and it's given me some weird stuff throughout the world years, because I don't like mice. I find mice to be one of just the most disgusting creatures on the planet. But even today, I thought about it. I thought about while I was getting dressed today about how attracted I was to this cheerleader mouse and then Gadget.
I'm really glad you're sharing your truth with all of us right now. That's very brave of you.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I've never kept a secret, but normally people don't ask.
That must have been confusing as a child too.
Oh, so confusing. Because of course, Chip and Dale are both attracted to Gadget and Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers. So I thought, am I a chipmunk? And I don't understand what's going on. And then I never understood why Monterey Jack wasn't attracted, even though she was the daughter of a good friend of his, I think.
He's a man of a certain age. You'd think he would be just saying things constantly that would be making the rest of the cast feel uncomfortable.
But at least they're the same species.
Sure.
We're talking about chipmunks going after a mouse.
And rodentia, though, right? They're all rodents.
I mean, I've never been really attracted to like a chimpanzee, and we're the same, you know.
What about
like
a cephalopod or an ungulate?
No, not that I remember. It's just one of those things where I've carried it with me throughout life, and I think it's one of those weird things where when people just talk about, oh yeah, I had a crush on this thing that wasn't a human being, but for whatever reason meant something to me, like as a kid. I'm sure there's somebody out there who like Rosie the robot from the Jetsons, like you loved her caretaker, you know, kind of mentality. And whenever you hear something go bing bing, like her little side of her head did, you just sort of, you know, get a little aroused. That has nothing to do with our guest today, Steve Poitras. But I will say this. This is one of those classic JJ Meets World conversations that covers a lot of ground.
Yep.
So if you like Shakespeare, if you like farts, the history of Downer, Minnesota, Morehead State University, winter storms, mustaches. We're all over the board, baby.
TV's Charlie Johnson.
TV's Charlie Johnson. TV's former Charlie Johnson.
What is he now? He's the director of the tourism.
Tourism.
Let's get that dude in here.
Yeah,
at some point.
He and I had a fight on the radio once.
Charlie, come in here and squash this beef with JJ.
There's no more beef.
You don't know that.
We have a good time.
You don't know that.
I'm pretty sure because we've been in the same room many times since.
What were you arguing about?
About a CNN article.
He seems like such an agreeable fellow.
Yeah, I think I was probably a little confrontational about it, and he was trying to cover himself and keep his personality. This episode's not about Charlie Johnson or the beef. Moving Parts is his band. They're wonderful. I've seen them many times. I've got no beef whatsoever. But Steve Poitras is a pretty cool dude. He's one of those adults who I don't feel like he looks at me like a kid,
right?
Which I always really appreciate. I feel like he looks at me as sort of a peer.
Right. Now, he would be the second local TV legend that we've had on the show with Doug Hamilton. Mm-hmm. So if you grew up in the FM area, you've probably heard Steve's dulcet tones talk about the weather. For the longest time, he had the distinction of being the only weather person in town who wasn't a meteorologist. Mm-hmm. And so you've seen him on TV, you've probably heard his radio show, and you've probably seen him on stage doing theater in town.
It's important to note that at no point does he pull out a cell phone and read anything during this episode. You'll understand why when you hear him start to pull out quotes and poems. This is all stuff that's locked away in his noggin. He's a pretty interesting dude. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get into this episode with Mr. Steve Poitras.
JJ Meets World.
Steve Poitras, welcome to JJ Meets World.
Thank you.
It's nice to have another guy who's familiar with the radio world so that we don't have to tell them what a microphone is and how it works, because I've been telling them that there's little tiny monsters inside the microphone who are just shouting it louder.
Yes, I was on the radio with microphone as recently as a few hours ago on Sunday morning with Investment Talk.
That's right. You and Paul Myers, and then is Brady Brunsvold still on there with you?
Indeed.
Yep. Yes. And then did you have a trivia time this weekend too?
We had that too.
So you've been a busy boy all weekend.
Well, it's not that busy, but it's nice to still have my hand in broadcasting in a small way, whether it's TV. Yeah.
Right off the bat, Trivia Time is a show that you host on KFGO.
Yeah, soon going to be 12 years that we've been doing it.
I'm a little addicted to the show.
Great.
I like to listen and test myself to see how smart I am. But so in a world where everyone's got Google at their fingertips, do you give a count of like 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000? If they don't have an answer, you're like, nope, I can tell you're looking it up.
Anytime I suspect stalling for the purpose of that person or someone with them to get help that quickly, then I really try to move it along. Hey, we need an answer. There have been a couple of instances in the past where I didn't realize, because a woman got on and I'd ask the question and she'd repeat it. She was getting, and I didn't realize until later. And I think she actually won. So be very careful. And people, where's your integrity? We're not playing for new cars here.
Right.
Yeah.
You might get tickets to a concert or to the Red Hawks, or 3 attractions at Thunder Road, or a $10 gift certificate to the Breadsmith.
It's a real seedy underbelly of the trivia world is Google.
You know, the thing is, you get a lot of regular callers, though, on that show. A lot of people who test their skills. And there are some people who I think are genuinely very intelligent and very trivia-based. But then every now and then, there's that one person, I've heard that trick you're talking about, like, who was Babe Ruth's first coach? Let's see, who was...
first coach.
Babe Ruth's first coach was, oh gosh, let me see. And meanwhile, like, you can tell they're snapping and they're trying to get their husband to look it up.
Yeah, and I don't object to somebody having... Sometimes someone will put their teenager or even younger on, because they want, and then they'll say the question, and I don't know for what reason, but if it's entertaining for them, let them do it. But.
Family Feud rules, right?
Well, JJ's been running trivia, you've been managing trivia at the Gastropub for a long time now.
And I always tell people this. I said, you can't use any modern technology to cheat, but if you brought an entire set of Encyclopedia Britannica with you, I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
no one's taking me up on
team gets together on Tuesday nights at Tailgaters, and it's a national or even international game, and it's with the various fields that our team is strong in. We do pretty well, and we don't win anything. It's just for the glory of competition and placing. So.
Trivia gives me flashbacks to my childhood when we'd go to Godfather's Pizza, because they'd have Trivial Pursuit cards on every table. You could just kind of ask questions, but I was 6 or 7 years old, so all of the questions were about stuff I'd have no idea of, right? So me and my sister couldn't really play, and I remember one question knowing the answer, and because I had the answer, I was on cloud 9 for the rest of the week because of it, and it was what Marvel Comics superhero says it's clobbering time? And the answer was The Thing.
Well done.
Right? 6-year-old Tucker knew that one.
Mm-hmm. But do you know the chemical symbol
already know
for chromium?
Already know. You said chemical, already know.
Interesting. How do you pick your trivia?
How do I?
Because it's great. It's so diverse. It's
I've used all kinds of sources, from games to online sites. There's a place called Trivia Bliss, and they have almost endless categories, and whether history, music, you name it, and so I've done that. Then I've also very conscientiously, over these nearly 12 years, I have saved the lists of questions from every show, and they're dated, and I have them in portfolios, folders by year. And so I recycle them, and whether or not I use the self-same question or turn it around, or it suggests a similar question, I do that. And I would say for each show, I put in a few hours, but I rather enjoy it, because when that leads you to places, and if you're just curious, it's satisfying curiosity.
Writing a good trivia question is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, you can't be too difficult, and yet you don't want it to be duck soup either. But there's something self-indulgent I have about it, that I'll ask a question, it won't be that bad, and somebody will get it, and then I'll have a little sidebar of something I want to comment on, and bring that up, or I'll ask people, well, in addition to that, for extra credit, and this won't knock you out, do you happen to know this about that question? And that gets interesting.
I also think interpretation is the hard part about writing a trivia question today too, where you can say, what famous brand uses a mermaid as their logo? And people might say, oh, it's Starbucks, right? The Starbucks mermaid. But then someone says, no, it's Sunkissed tuna.
That's what came to my mind.
So you have to be specific.
Tuna,
Starkissed, thank you very much.
Sunkissed is oranges.
Oh, they're not in the tuna game yet?
I don't think so.
Sunkissed is just another word for melanoma.
And nothing left to lose. Yes, very good. That's great.
Well, trivia time, of course, is one of my favorite things that you do, but you're kind of a broadcast legend around here. You've done TV, you've done radio. Have you ever done any writing?
Other than for news, when I was reporting on Valley News Live, and that's writing, I guess, when you put together stories. But
yeah,
I read a great deal. I read obsessively, but I've never had the discipline to write. Other than I will once in a while try to write a short poem, but it's often will be lampooning another poem. Oh, you want to know one I did way back when I was a sophomore at the then Moorhead State College campus high school. Sophomore. Ran into Carl Sandburg, Chicago. You know, freight handlers to the nation. Stormy, windy, this city of the broad shoulders, proud to be all of this. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I lived in Moorhead. So, windy, flabby, city of the bulging belt line, sugar refiner to the valley and city of colleges. They tell me you are conservative, and I believe them, for I've seen you defeat the school bond. They tell me you are stupid, and I believe them, for I've smelled the sewage bond. Then it was, I guess it was where I went. Windy, flabby, city of the bulging belt line, proud to be across the river from Fargo, North Dakota, home of Roger Maris.
You know, what that makes me think of is, so I've done a bunch of theater with Poitras over the years, and I've also seen you audition for shows a lot, and you have the most like signature audition style of anyone in town here that I've seen, because, you know, Steve has a lot of either monologues or just poems. Oftentimes it's beat poetry from like beatnik poetry that he'll do when he goes in. And he doesn't have to prepare because he's been preparing for years. So like we just had auditions recently and he came in and we're like, oh, what can you do? And he's like, oh, I'll just do this and I'll throw this one in there too. Right. He's got like a whole like playlist of stuff that he can kind of draw from. And it's usually steeped in literature or poetry of some kind, you know, word performance. And I love hearing it.
Thank you.
Have you always been a fan of literature? I mean,
well, yeah, somewhat. I'll tell you though, Tucker here, of course, playing the most famous role in the most famous play in the English language, Hamlet. Mm-hmm. It's only as the years have gone by that I've gained a true and ever-growing appreciation for Shakespeare. I mean, I just start to get a buzz talking about it. I mean, 37 or so plays, 150 some sonnets, etc. And it's like nothing was ever thrown away. Right. I mean, his monumental talent and universality of his sense of experience, of the human experience. And, you just look, and they're different. I once played Friar Lawrence in Romeo and Juliet. And he comes, the gray-eyed morn smiles on frowning night, checkering the eastern clouds with streaks of light, and flecked darkness like a drunkard reels from forth day's path and Titan's fiery wheels. Now ere the sun advance its burning eye, the day to cheer, and night's dank dew to dry. I must have filled this ocean. He's out there to gather up. But just that line, night's dank dew to dry. I mean, it's just masterful. And you think, man, that guy he just knocked it out. There's a line from Hamlet that I'm in the middle of line memorization right now, over 1,000 lines I have to memorize.
Yes.
So
I'm at the moment, I'm just banging my head against a wall going, oh my God, why can't I remember this? But in the end, spoiler alert, when he's about to die and he tells Horatio, I almost called him Mercutio, but you were just talking about Romeo and Juliet, which is why he tells Horatio, absent thee from felicity a while. Don't kill yourself just yet. Because I need you to tell me a story. And something about...
How does he absent
thee from felicity a while when he's about to drink the poison cup. And he says, don't do that. That particular line, for whatever reason, and I haven't put my finger on it yet, it chokes me up. I don't know why. Absent thee from felicity a while. It's just, it's a simple line, but something about it strikes a chord with me. And I think that's part of the reason why Shakespeare is so timeless, in that it's not so specific that you know exactly what's going on, and so many people can apply their own thoughts and feelings and take from it what they will. He's endlessly redefinable, translatable, which is manna from heaven for the theater.
His insights, his perceptions, and he sees everything from both sides. Yeah,
there's something about too. I like to try to think about Shakespeare and the time of Shakespeare. What was it like when you were, a poor, serf of the land or whatever, your lot in life would have been. You were a groundling at the theater, and this was the only form of entertainment you had. Yeah. And what it would be like then to be hanging on an actor's every word as they're describing something to you that you will never see and experience in the most beautiful prose one can imagine. But it's also then a travesty, I think, of how we educate people on Shakespeare. We seem to find, and I'm speaking generally here about the school system in this country, how we approach it. We make it almost doomed to fail for most people because we don't expose them to the work the correct way. We make them read it in class, and that's basically it. You learn some characters and stuff like that. It's meant to be heard and seen and spoken and thought about and returned to time and time again.
Well, yeah, we can draw a connection with that and trivia time, because every once in a while I'll say, okay, here's a question from Shakespeare, and often I'll get from the other end, oh no, and I'll try to not have it that obscure, like
right.
What character in Shakespeare says, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears"?
You mean in Julius Caesar?
It is. Well, it's from Julius, but it's actually Mark Antony who says it.
Right.
It's his funeral oration for Julius Caesar.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Hamlet's another Shakespeare, though, too, that even if you're not into Shakespeare, if you go watch it, you're going to pick up at least 20 times like, oh, I've heard that line before.
Yes.
Because these lines get repeated so often in popular culture. There are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy, right?
Indeed.
Frailty, thy name is woman, to be or not to be. Methinks the lady dost protest too much. There's so many lines that we have all heard time and time again in popular culture. You wouldn't even know what was from Hamlet. And so the light bulb is going to be going off in your head. We could talk about Hamlet forever.
I love when they pull Hamlet into popular culture and you don't even realize.
Like The Lion King?
Like Lion King. Or even just when someone's quoting a line, like you watch a movie where they're doing a high school production of a play and you can instantly tell it's Hamlet.
As soon as you see the skull.
Yep.
If you see someone holding the skull, you know exactly what you're seeing.
There's a great episode of Tales from the Crypt where John Lovitz is this down and out actor who's trying to, make something of himself, and he sees an audition for Hamlet, and this really good looking, like kind of soap opera guy who he's been, back and forth with all these years says, well, I'm going to try out for it too. He goes, you're not going to know it. This is Shakespeare's one of his greatest plays, and you don't have the appreciation for it. And so they both are going after this role, and it's directed by John Aston, this play, who of course can chew up scenery like there's no tomorrow. Well, at the very end, again, spoiler alert, but I believe the episode's 30 years old at this point. It's a mental institution where the patients have taken over, and these guys think that they're going to play the role of Hamlet, but really they're going to be playing the role of Yorick. And they're like, but he was dead years before the play. And they're like, I know. And so they pulled John Lovett's skull out, and John Aston has this scene where he's kind of sitting off in the wings and he goes, he really does have the look. I think I was wrong about him. And it's just a weird, funny little thing. But again, all based around somebody's love of Hamlet and being able to tell that joke. Right. That joke would not be funny if people didn't have that knowledge of what the show is.
Were you in Macbeth with me? Who did you play in Macbeth?
I had 3 small parts. I was at the end. I was old Seward to come on.
Yep, that's right.
And then I was an old man in a scene of talk where my son, like horses were eating each other. There's a line of something like that, and there was one other small role, but Macbeth overall is probably my favorite. I know it the best. There's a little patch in there where Macbeth is seriously mentally troubled after he's killed the king. He says, methought I heard a voice say, sleep no more, Macbeth hath murdered sleep. And Shakespeare then goes into this marvelous thing, sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care, nature's balm, sweet, chief nourisher in life's feast. And I'm not getting it all, but it's about 4 or 5 lines talking about sleep. Right. And it's eternal. It's for all time.
Right. That ties in.
And that says how wretched it is if you can't get decent sleep.
Right. I mean, that ties into To Be or Not to Be, because Hamlet he's talking about suicide and about resting. And at one point he says, there's a period in it, but it reads so well when you say to die, to sleep perchance to dream.
Yes. Oh, that's right.
He says to die, period, to sleep perchance to dream. But I like reading it as to die, to sleep, because he's thinking about suicide. He's thinking about getting away from this place. But then he says, but in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, right? And I love that line. With the title of the Robin Williams movie, What Dreams May Come, is based off of that. The notion that what sleep will I have when I am dead? What dreams could I possibly have when I am dead? Either there's nothing or there's something, and I will be tortured because the Father has strengthened his canon against self-slaughter. Is the wording that he uses there.
Lord Buckley, who died, but used to do beat versions of, like the Gettysburg Address or Mark Antony's Funeration or his. I don't know much beyond the open, but for Hamlet's famous, it was to swing or not to swing. That is the hang up.
Steve, last time I had a chance to chat with you one-on-one, we were at the KFGO Christmas party, and you were telling me about you were doing some work with the schools. And you sounded just the most passionate I think I've ever heard you when you were talking about that experience.
It's been over 5 years that I've been doing it. In my semi-retirement from TV, which happened in 2011, I was still doing a little radio, but I had more than a little free time on my hands, and I ran into an old friend over here at the downtown Fargo Library, Glenn Tornell. We're comparing notes. He was in he says, something else you might be interested in. He says, I've been working as a substitute paraprofessional in Fargo schools. You might look into that. And I said, I think I will. I like kids. And I saw Brenda Fisher at the district office. They got, they have to do a quick background check. You get out this. And boom, I was out on my first assignment the next day for a couple hours of recess supervision at Longfellow Elementary. So this has gone on. I have gone on, I've been at nearly every public school at every level in Fargo, but now I pretty much limit it to elementary schools. In this last couple of years, it has mostly been to Bennett Elementary. And with the passage of time now, I know kids that are in 5th grade that I knew in kindergarten. And you just become very fond of many, not just at that school, but others as well. And I plan to be swinging into that again. As a substitute, you don't get paid as well as if you were, full on there all the time. But I'm not doing it for the money. I mean, I wouldn't do it for nothing. But as a substitute, you can go to different schools, and even within the same school, like Bennett, year before last, somebody left for another job, and Sarah Schaefer, the principal at Bennett, said, Steve, that job's yours if you want it. And I says, thank you. I like coming to Bennett every day, but I also like the variety where I fill in for different people, even here in the school. So, you see more kids, and goofing with kids is just about the best thing in the world. It really is. And then I suddenly changed my voice with them. Oh, it knocks them out.
It's such an important role to play as well, too. When you can see someone as an authority figure, but also kind of as on their level, who can be a little silly and be a little goofy. And you're a person, too, who I feel takes genuine interest. And when you ask a question, you're looking for an answer, not just somebody to ask you some questions.
I'm conscious. It's not that I ever let that distract from genuinely trying to help the kids in the classroom or whatever, for sure. And kids sense when they know you have their best interests at heart.
Kids have amazing BS detectors. They really, really do. And I think the adults when I was a kid that had the biggest impact on me were when they acknowledged that. They were like, I'm not going to treat this kid like he's an idiot because he's a kid. Right?
And I'll also add, there are so many really good teachers. I kind of enjoy, even at the elementary schools, I perhaps enjoy the kindergartners, first graders more than the other, although I've had great time with third graders, et cetera. But the kindergarten teachers, they just amaze me. There's exciting things. There's a range. Some kids come to kindergarten, they've had their parents reading to them and so forth, and others really haven't had much at all. But they bring them along, and whatever. But you run into a kindergartner, and they're reading fluently. more than just really simple stuff. And it just knocks me out. I think, wow, they've got it made. I tell the kids, the better you can read, that's the deal. The better you can read, that's, it for all time,
I remember my first grade teacher, Susan Kolstad, sending me home with...
I know Mrs. Kolstad.
Isn't she just
She
the
was
best?
at Hawthorne.
Yep.
Yeah.
She is, without a doubt, one of the greatest educators on the planet.
She's so serene in the classroom. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and she taught me to value art, and she taught me to value failure. So not everyone can do the same art project the same way, but you're doing it only in the way that you can do it, and that's special and important. She gave me the first book someone from outside my family gave me. I was able to read all of Lyle the Crocodile. And she goes, "You really like that, huh?" And I was just enamored that I did. And she goes, "Take that book home with you. That's yours now." And I still have that book.
Yeah,
in fact, she and her husband live just over here, one building over.
I had known Mark was out of Moorhead. I'd known Moorhead High and all. And so, then I was I think she was teaching first grade at Hawthorne when I was in. And she welcomed me and told the kids a little bit about me, and so, they were, welcoming.
Isn't it amazing when you get someone just who's passionate like that? And then she retires, but just like you, there's a certain generation who think of retirement as like, well, I'm just going to work 4 days a week instead of 5. And she immediately started going over to, I think it was the Sanford, working with kids who are going through cancer therapy and doing art projects and stuff with them. What is it about retirement that made you not want to slow down? Because you're a busy guy for someone who's quote unquote retired.
Well, I think I look at it this way, and I think somebody else said it first, is that retirement can be where you only do what you really want to do. And so whether it's like going to the schools, love that, doing the radio shows with Trivia Time or Investment Talk, or trying out and once in a while getting a part in a play. Oh, by the way, I got a part in Noises Off that
you did?
FMCT is going to do.
Congratulations. Which character?
Selsden Mowbray.
Yes. You'll be phenomenal at that. Of course you're Selsden. That's right. I was in Noises Off in high school, and I played Tim the stagehand.
Okay.
And that was the first show I was in where I remember getting big laughs myself just for doing like a motion or something. And
that's rather emotionally fueling, isn't it?
It felt amazing. I've never done heroin. I assume that's what heroin feels like. But Noises Off is such a good show. You'll be perfect in that role.
Here's a confession, though. I myself, even though obviously now I'm reading and learning lines, I have never seen the film. I've never seen a production of Noises Off.
It's a good film, but it does not have the same impact of the theater performance of it. It doesn't have the same energy.
Right.
Like it just does not have that live theater energy that I think farces really need.
I think that the thing that the movie suffers from is the ability to have cuts. And that is what is amazing to me about Noises Off. Noises Off is so much about timing. I mean, it's like a stopwatch going start to finish. But when you've got the ability to do cuts and different angles, I almost would prefer the film were just a static shot, and they've got to do the whole thing in one go.
I see what you're talking about.
I feel the same way about live performances of music.
Was Michael Caine? Was he the director?
He's the director. Who else is in that?
Carol Burnett, Christopher Reeves.
That's right.
John Ritter.
Oh my!
The guy who played Cousin Larry
was Tim.
Who played the part of Selsden Mowbray?
I can't. It was an old British actor who they kind of brought out of retirement for the show, and I wish I could remember what his name was.
That's fine. I have an internet device in my hand.
I feel like he was like a sir at that point.
To interject something about Michael Caine. His real name is Morris Micklewhite, and he was of the age where he served with the British Army and was in the front lines in Korea. British were there as well as us. But getting on, he was poor, as many budding actors were. And he said he finally got some success and was only able to buy his first car when he was 31 years old. However, he said that car was a Rolls Royce.
It's Denholm Elliott.
Oh yeah, Denholm Elliott.
He played so.
I can even picture him.
Yeah, Carol Burnett, Julie Haggerty is Poppy, Mary Lou Henner.
Man, it was an all-star cast.
It is good. The movie, don't get me wrong, is really, really good. In fact, I've had a lifelong crush on Carol Burnett. That's still to this day. And she does such a phenomenal job in this role.
JJ, so knowing that about you now, and also knowing that you have a massive Angela Lansbury crush, if the two of them came in and it was like, we both want to make out with you, but you can only make out with one of us, which one would you pick?
I'd go with Angela Lansbury myself.
I know, right?
When she was younger, she was hot.
Yeah. I also have a great
And
idea.
of course, as Ben Franklin said, when it comes to older women, the advantages of older women. His last one was finally, they're so grateful.
Oh, man. God. Did he die of venereal diseases? You think he would, Ben Franklin?
Well, he reached an old age. He was, I think, well into his 80s.
I was wondering if he picked something up in France.
Probably did. Did you ever see that the HBO miniseries about John Adams?
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite parts is the gentleman who's playing Ben Franklin. They showed something I never knew about Ben Franklin, which is he liked to be carried around to places. And so
in a sedan chair?
Yeah. And so they show him like when he first arrives at the Continental Congress. And I said, I didn't know that. So I looked it up and I'm like, sure enough, there it is. He was a man of like, not refined taste, but leisurely tastes. He loved long baths and lots of hot water. And so.
Well, he did a lot of stuff in his life. He
sure
really
did.
Really did.
I sometimes wonder what I'm going to be remembered for, because I haven't invented anything like bifocals or the potbelly stove. So I got to start inventing something, but I don't know what needs to be invented at this point.
I think his name is on the Franklin stove. Is that Franklin? I think so.
That's
Must
him.
be.
Yep.
Must be.
And if you go to his grave site in Philadelphia, it's one of the most popular attractions in Philadelphia. It's, just a couple of blocks down from.
His statue is on the top of the highest building in Philadelphia.
Is it really?
And I think they have a sort of a statute that you cannot build higher. At least this is what you cannot build a building higher than that. Now that whether or not they changed it, it's up there, but by today's standards, with skyscrapers going so much higher, I have to look into that. But
we just keep moving the statue to the next highest building. Like Franklin has to oversee.
He's on the top of some specific building, whether it's
It's not the Capitol, is it? The state Capitol
no,
building?
state capitol's in Harrisburg in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not a geography
Trivia
nut.
question for you there, Tucker, and you missed it. You're out.
I learned my state capitals through a song on the animated series Animaniacs, where they take the song Turkey in the Straw and they do like Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Indianapolis, Indiana, and Columbus is the capital of Ohio. There's my
That's how I learned that. Also the countries and the planets.
But the countries is out of date now.
That's true.
Because at the time when they made it, we've established new countries, some split.
That's true. And if we
I
ever...
was at my age, when I turned 8, I had the one and only birthday party that I had in my youth. And friends came over. This was in Downer. I grew up in Downer, which was in the Barnesville School District. Someone gave me one of those picture puzzle maps of the United States, where each state is a piece, except for the New England states. You got to jam some together. Well, they list the state capital on every state. Well, I got so, I could put that puzzle together and really fast. And I learned, without really working at it, the state capitals. I went to a Catholic school in Barnesville that existed long ago, the Assumption School. My third grade teacher, Sister Loretta, somehow discovered, she saw me drawing states or something, and she got into it, and she suddenly realized that I knew all these state capitals. Well, it's something that they were teaching at the same time in the 5th grade. And the enrollment there was small, so there were 2 grades in each room. No kindergarten, then I never had kindergarten. 1st and 2nd, 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th, 7th and 8th even. Well, long story, tried to abbreviate this. She said we went over to the 5th and 6th grade room. The 5th graders were learning state capitals, and we got up like a spelling bee. All the 5th graders on that side of the room, and I'm over here, and they're throwing the questions on the state capitals. Well, I thought I can't do worse than Ty because I know them all, and so we finally got down. A lot of them dropped out really quickly, and of course I knew mine. We got the last one. There was Kathy Thomas. And they asked, West Virginia, and she couldn't come up with it. Steve? Now, I can't remember whether they called me Steven or Stevie, whatever. And I said, well, that'd be Charleston. Whoa, I'm a winner. My older brother, Philip, was in the 6th grade, so he witnessed this. But anyway, then we go just a few steps back to the 3rd and 4th grade room, come in, and Sister Loretta says, Stevie won. Yay! So I had knocked off the 5th grade.
You were the toast of the grade at that point. Huh?
Yeah. I just knew. I knew stuff.
Only one birthday in your childhood? Only one birthday party? Why was that?
We never really made a big deal about birthdays in my family. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting?
And I never felt as if I had lost out on anything. I never had any doubts about my parents' affection and care for me, none whatsoever.
I know some families who do the exact same thing where birthday's just another day. And, there's maybe a cake for dinner, and that's about the bulk of it. And
I think we often got a cake. That was cool.
And I know some families who go way overboard with birthdays. It's almost like a month-long celebration.
I don't know about you, but when it comes to chocolate cake with chocolate frosting and vanilla ice cream, that's a dessert that's hard to beat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's hard for me to turn that down. Like JJ's getting over food poisoning right now, and I bet if we offered him some,
do you know what it derived from?
I think it was from ribs. I had some bad pork on Friday.
Oh.
Yeah, it's caused quite the weekend. I was detailing to Tucker that I was worried I was having like a heart attack yesterday, and I was very tender to the touch. And of course, I'm the only person home this weekend. Ooh. So they wouldn't have found me until like Monday afternoon, which would be just even worse.
I have offered to bring him to the hospital. He has not
say
taken me
that
up on it
there are
yet.
many more cases of food poisoning that people don't even realize. That
I'm sure.
They attribute it to something else and they get over it.
A couple years ago, I got food poisoning so bad, I was hospitalized for 2 days.
Gee,
because I threw up so many times.
Do you know what that derived from?
It was a meal at a local restaurant, and it was like the moment I finished the meal, I started to feel sick. Like the moment I put my fork down, and then it escalated from that, and I threw up so many times that my organs were shutting down. And so they had to hook me up to a bunch of IVs and stuff and monitor me and do a battery of tests on me to see what was up. And they were never able to pinpoint it is exactly this. They're like, so it's probably food poisoning, if anything. And a weird side effect of that whole spiel, before I got food poisoning, I always drank my coffee with cream and sugar. After I got food poisoning, which had nothing to do with coffee, I wasn't drinking coffee. I've only liked my coffee black. For some reason, it was enough of a trial to go through that it flipped a switch in my brain and changed a taste preference of mine for whatever reason. So the coffee I'm drinking now, black because of food poisoning.
I always like the additives, some sort of creamer and sugar, and I do at least 2 cups every morning, if not 3. Just like millions and millions. Not only this, but
something about holding that hot drink and taking a sip from it from time to time.
Well, some of us, it kind of unlocks, our bowels in the morning. To be frank about it.
Yeah,
here we go.
Yeah, you got to drop a couple off.
You've
pinch off a grumpy.
You've worked in industries where coffee's a pretty important aspect of it too. I think of it, the radio station, there's always hot coffee in the pot.
Yes.
I imagine at the television studio too, there's always hot coffee or...
Yeah, I think there was in the lounge, as I remember. Yes, I remember definitely at Channel 4. I'm not just, but...
I love how this episode has gone from the brilliance of Shakespeare to taking dumps.
Yeah. I'm sure that I'm sure that Shakespeare at one point had written something that involved
that's one thing. I don't know that he ever referred to anything remotely to.
He talks about genitalia. He talks about sexual stuff. I don't think he ever talks about defecation.
No,
as far as I'm aware of.
Peeing.
Well, maybe the porter. I mean, the porter talks about. I'll have to look at that monologue again in Macbeth. He's talking about getting drunk and he's talking about losing your erection. So he's talking about sexual dysfunction.
Well, yeah, there's a line in Taming of the Shrew, where some of the suitors of Bianca are around, and when there's an old guy, Grumio, he says something, he thinks, my cake is dough on both sides.
in Hamlet, when he's got his head in Ophelia's lap while they're watching the play within a play, and he refers to, you're talking about country matters. and it's sexual innuendo
Sure.
that he's talking about.
Yeah. Well, that devious fellow.
Last night when I couldn't reach the remote, I watched, regrettably, 55 minutes of the 1999 film Dudley Do-Right, based off of course, the old Rocky and Bullwinkle.
I'll save you now.
Yeah. And during that, I realized, because there's a lot of fart jokes that are a part of it. Stuff that they don't need, that, here's the thing. So Dudley Do-Right's not a good movie, but it has got great ideas throughout the whole thing. Alfred Molina plays Snidely Whiplash, and he does so in such a perfect way. Like, he's not cartoony, but he's a live action version of this character. I loved it. It's unfortunate that Brendan Fraser and Sarah Jessica Parker had to be a part of it. But at what point did we start accepting the crude bodily humor and saying this is for children? This is children's humor.
Kids love it.
Kids love the farts.
Yeah. What's wrong with that?
But do they really? I just think that there was more entertaining ways to get a smile out of a kid back in the day in movies than there are.
I kind of agree with you, JJ, but I've thought about this. In the origins of humor in the human species, as we evolved, humor came in there sometime, and I'm thinking before we had much in the way of any kind of developed language, but obviously people had relationships with each other, and I'm thinking that somebody had to have cut a good one and was kind of proud of it, and somebody nearby was, holy cow, and that they got a laugh, and that the first laughs derived probably out of the kingdom of farts.
And you know why they call that comedy gold? It's because it does not lose its luster over time. It's just as good of a joke now as it was in 2000 BC.
Do you think that it's because you elicit a response, and a real visceral response from someone else? Because the other person in the room, the person who smells it, does not usually think it's very funny.
I know,
but the person who dealt it is the one who finds it funny.
And the other person can't wait until they can get your back.
Yeah,
I love it. I think it's the best thing ever.
Tucker and I really had a symphony going on before you got here.
In this room, it echoes really nicely.
One of my best ones is with the family. We had been on vacation. We were at a McDonald's in Watertown, South Dakota, and they had hard plastic bench seats. I just rattled one off. There weren't many people around except my own family. I just rattled one off, and I thought, God, you can't do any better than that.
One of my all-time favorite jokes is, one who farts in church sits in his own pew.
Oh, yes.
That one will always tickle my fancy.
I don't remember which play of Shakespeare that one was from, but that is a good one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's from, what's the one that they adapted into 10 Things I Hate About You?
Taming of the Shrew.
Oh, that's the one. I was not a fan of Shakespeare in high school. I agree with what you said earlier, Tucker, about how I listened to my fellow students stumble through it, reading aloud in class. I didn't see the performance aspect of it. And I just thought, meh, this isn't for me. Until I read Twelfth Night. And I remember reading Twelfth Night, and the language popped off the page, and I understood what they were going for, and I was laughing while I was reading it. And ever since then, I've become a bigger fan of Shakespeare. They asked me at Fargo South High a couple of years ago to guest as the Prince. And so I had a wonderful time doing that role with these high school kids, but they made me go through the same study that the high school kids went through of exactly what are you saying here? What does this line mean? And where's the breath, right? Don't they talk about that in Shakespeare a lot? Where the breath ends up?
Right. Probably. Yeah.
And then I had a bunch of these young high school kids telling me you really need to deliver this line quicker, or you need to do this. And I was like, hey, easy. And then I lost my voice 2 days before our first show. So I was squeaking when I was doing some of these lines, and Kevin Kennedy, the director, was approached by one of the football coaches, and he goes, who the hell is that kid who's playing the Prince? We got to get him on a team. He's enormous. And Kevin's like, yep, he's a junior. I'll give you his phone number. You can see if you can get him on the football team. And And so it was, I always thought that was kind of funny that
fantastic.
I still could be sort of confused for a high school student.
If only you'd followed through and actually played with him for a season.
Oh, had like my never been kissed moment, like relive my glory days.
Be like watching LeBron James when he was playing in high school. Just destroying every kid on the field.
But that's the thing is I've never had athletic ability, so I don't think I would have been any good. I could have stood there and maybe
I'd put you on defense though.
Yeah,
like,
but even that, you still need to be good, like, and understand what's going on.
But I think in high school, I think you just need to be a few sizes larger than the average junior kid, you know, right? I think that's what you got to be.
Hopefully, fingers crossed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I could have gotten a big scholarship. My life could have changed. This podcast could be all about college sports. Luckily, it's not. See, can you remember the worst weather event you lived through?
Well, I don't think we've had blizzards over the last years, like anything like. I remember the toughest one, or most famous, was in March of '66, where it left streets in Fargo-Moorhead with drifts up to the street signs, and everything closed down for 3 or 4 days. That was the one that people talk about. I don't know that it led to any fatalities or anything, but boy, it sure was a big event. I was a undergraduate at Moorhead State, and basically we were at like apartments of other students, and it was just party time for about 3 days. And one enterprising young man got a snowmobile, and he went and he'd get cases of beer and whatever else, the orders, and come and deliver, and it was party time. But I remember growing up when there were really good blizzards that shut things down, knocked out power. I recall having to go to kerosene lamps and well, anyway, getting by that way. And the tornado, the famous June 20 tornado of 1957. Okay. Lived in Downer, which is, by the way the crow flies, less than 20 miles from Fargo. And we were going to go, I was 11 at the time, and we were going to go to a roller skating birthday party for one of our friends, Larry Lean, at the Scars roller skating drive-in east of Barnesville on 34 there, a couple miles out of town. Well, there was this alert for really bad weather, and so we postponed it till the next night. But you could look up. It was the blackest sky I've ever seen, that storm. And I'm sure we got something out of it, but it mostly, in its wrath, went due east along Highway 10 and places out around Glendon and things that ripped up trees after it had done its nastiest stuff here in North Fargo. But those would be probably standout memories for me.
Downer is a town. When we would go to our lake place, we took the Downer Road, is what we called it, to get down there. And when you come off the interstate and go into town, there's like a cross highway that leads to Barnesville.
Yeah, State Highway 9.
Is that 9?
County Road 10 and State Highway 9.
I guess on the northeast side, I think it was a little filling station at one point.
The Midway.
Is that what it was called?
The Midway, yeah. That was one of the spots in my godparents, as a matter of fact, ran it, and their family. It was 3. You could get licenses for 3-2 beer, so it had that, and guys played cards in there. It had a little bar they could do hamburgers, make you lunches, things like that, sell you candy, and pump gas and fuel oil out front, yeah.
Just recently, I drove through Downer again, and I saw that someone has turned it into a family home now.
Holy cow.
And could you imagine what that place... Because I stopped there many a time as a youngster going through, and I can't imagine what that would look like as a home now. But it's neat to know that it's repurposed, because the building still looks pretty much the same.
Downer, when I was a kid, it was much different. We had a big block building that had been a bank. It was the Downer Mercantile. My dad ran it for years, where it was a general store. We sold, had pumps out front that, you pump like this, boosh, for gas. But it was a grocery store. We had a 3-2 beer joint in there. It was the post office. And we sold fishing license and tackle and you name it. It was a mercantile like that. Well, my dad saw the writing on the wall that if people were getting more and more mobile, they weren't going to come and spend their money there when they could go to Moorhead and supermarkets and all that. So he went to work for Coast Brothers, ultimately becoming their bookkeeper for years. And for some years, he turned to my mother and his kids ran the store for until I guess I was 14, and then we moved to Moorhead. So I'd often be left in there when the quiet times in the summer afternoons, when virtually nobody's coming in, and I would be in charge. I was in there in the store when I was as young as 9 years old. And if somebody came in, some man from the town or I knew they wanted, I set them up with their 3-2 beer. I mean, it was a simple life. It was like Andy Mayberry with some curves. But anyway, back then, Downer had 2 big elevators for grain. It had 2 potato houses. It had a lumberyard, hardware store. There was the town hall. The Midway, and then the very active Coast Brothers pit where they made blocks and bricks and they, gravel washing. They were the gravel that went into the concrete for much of the expansion of Fargo Moorhead came from that range of gravel out there that runs right along the edge of Downer and it's east and it runs on up. But
God, the deep cuts about this town. Like, where they source the gravel from.
Well, see, that's the fantastic. Town was, I always grew up, I thought, well, it was just Downer and, it was another farm town. But we were also a mining and manufacturing town. They mined gravel and they made bricks and blocks.
It's now not, junkyard's not the right word, but like it's got the repurposed car parts and...
Stuff is
stacked up for miles.
Like I say, it's completely different, and yet people have found it because of its proximity. I suppose there are people building new houses in areas out there. I thought nobody would ever. It's like you saying somebody's converted the Midway into a family residence. That's hard to fathom.
It's also got one of the best roadside joints now with that main line. The food there is good.
And see, that was converted from they would dealt with potatoes. I don't know if they washed potatoes there or something.
Really?
Sure, they shipped them because that's potato country out there, and as well as any other crops, corn and.
Do you ever use that as a pickup line? Like, hey, I'm Steve Poitras. I'm from potato country.
Well, we used to. When I was a kid, you picked potatoes by hand. You had a partner. And you each had a half bushel basket, and you went along, whether bent over or on your knees, and you got your basket full, and then you'd have a certain amount of potato sacks, burlap sacks. You come out, and one would hold and pour, and boom. And for every bushel that you picked, you and your partner would make, generally it was 10 cents. So you made a nickel apiece. If you picked 100 bushels, that was $10. You'd each get $5. Big money back in, this is like in the early mid-50s, later 50s.
To put it in the idea, like a bushel it's not like 4 pounds of potatoes. A bushel's got to be
a big bag. It's about 60 pounds of potatoes. Yeah.
So you're picking a lot of potatoes to get that, but I mean, that was good money back then. And also you get to be out in the sun with your friend, right?
You'd end up really dirty, of course, but we did it, and we only did it on Saturdays. Nobody worked on Sundays in those days. Nobody worked on Sunday. Well, not totally true, but a lot of people did. But we'd have, when it wasn't school, we'd pick on Saturdays, and you'd be mighty tired by the end of the day. Mighty tired. But like $5, the county fair would come to Barnesville, and with $5, you could just have all the fun in the world. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite ride from back in the day?
Well, I can tell you one. I was never keen on the Ferris wheel. On that trip going up, looking down, I was always a little, and I still am, a little bit squeamish about a Ferris wheel. I guess I like the bullet going up and back and twirling around, and I could handle all of those real wild. I'll tell you this: some years later, my younger boy Antoine and I went down to Valley Fair. It's called, and we went on a whole lot of rides. I went on about a dozen rides. My favorite were the 2 conventional old roller coasters.
Oh, like the Excalibur, I think, is one of them. The old wooden ones.
We did a lot of them. They'll take you up and then they drop you, and big swings, and
There's a rich part of American history that's tied into roller coasters. It was, it's a uniquely American thing. It's like jazz music.
Another one, if you got a really good ride on a tilt-a-whirl, where they really bend you to the back, with that centrifugal force. But often, sometimes your tilt-a-whirl just didn't swing as much as it should.
I'm so not built for carnival rides. I hate them. I don't like doing them. I don't get pleasure from that feeling that you get from a roller coaster, where the drop in your stomach or the nervousness because this feels dangerous, even though I know I'm safe. I've only ever been on one roller coaster, and it was they probably don't have it anymore. Do they even have Camp Snoopy at the?
It's now called the Park at MOA.
Okay, so when it was Camp Snoopy at the Mall of America, and they had a roller coaster in there. And I, as a kid, was like, I want to go on that. Roller coasters are supposed to be fun. I was probably 6. And I finally went on it with my cousin Josie. And within 30 seconds of it starting, I wanted off. I was like, nope, I don't like this. Don't like this at all. And so I went through the roller coaster. And by most roller coaster standards, it's nothing. It's a teeny tiny little thing. Nothing like what they have at Valley Fair. But ever since then, I learned something about myself that day. That I was like, yeah, I do not get any enjoyment out of rides that put you in scenarios like that. I can actually do a Ferris wheel because it's leisurely, right? I'm not being made to feel gross. I like going up on the Ferris wheel, but roller coasters, tilt-a-whirl, like those towers that just Tower of Terror drops, not for me. And I definitely would not wait in line for hours to go on one of those things.
Yeah, boy, that's when the one and only, I thought that's enough for me at Camp Snoopy, where you didn't realize they were masking much of the line in tunnels. You ever had, you think you're going to get on, this looks like the line. And you get in, no, there's still hundreds more people waiting. And, come here, you get a ride, and then you're waiting 2 hours for, no.
No thanks.
Yep, no.
I'm surprised they don't do something like add, Disney's famous for making the queue process part of the ride. So while you're waiting, you're watching content that sets you up for whatever the story's going to be, or there's things that are only available while you're waiting in line to make that hour and 45 minutes more bearable.
Makes sense. You've got sort of a captive audience there.
Mm-hmm. I'm surprised they don't add gift shops in there, right? Like, you got them. It's like the checkout lane at the grocery store. That's why they put all the candy and magazines there. It's because we know we've got you for the next 15 minutes.
Yeah. I hate waiting in lines.
Do you have a job from your childhood that you think back really fondly of, that you think like, gosh, that was one of my favorite jobs? You talked about working at the store and.
Yeah, working at the store was fine, except it could be kind of boring. We had a couple of booths in there, so friends we could. In those days, unlike today, very few people learned to play cards. Everybody played cards. Whether it was whist or hucklebuck or pinochle, cribbage. They didn't play bridge. I learned bridge later when I got to college, and it's a great card game, but everybody played cards, and that was a great pastime.
I love cards. In fact, I learned whist because I heard so many people talking about it. They said it's a game of kings.
How many of your contemporaries play cards?
Barely anybody.
Yeah.
My sister
Unless it's like Hold'em, because that became popular, so that's about it.
Well, like poker might be something else, but I'm talking about these. This was social events. People got together for card parties, being pre-TV. See, I remember days before. I was about 7 when the first TV channel came on here. It was Channel 6, and they wouldn't come on until late afternoon. We'd sit there and watch the test pattern. And then one of the early shows that was on was Flash Gordon. And I suppose now if you looked at it, the production values must have been so crude, but we loved it.
Yeah, CG hadn't made its way yet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, some fun in-camera tricks though, right? Back in the day.
But
and that was like probably the old style cameras too, where if you see like a flash of light or something too bright, like the cameras couldn't even handle it correctly. So you see sort of like this like empty vacant spot.
Well, Flash Gordon was played by an actor named Buster Crabbe. Crabbe.
That's a great last name.
Buster Crabbe.
When you think of, who is the guy who played Superman in all the serials?
George Reeves.
George Reeves, yeah.
Yes.
And all these people who played superheroes before, like people of my generation barely remember that Christopher Reeves was the first matinee idol of the Superman franchise. But
was there any kind of family connection between Christopher Reeves and George Reeves?
I don't believe so.
Yeah,
I believe if I remember right, George Reeves, the Superman, didn't he kill himself?
Yep.
did he kill himself or was he murdered?
Maybe there's some.
I think that there's some speculation.
Yeah, it might be.
Because there's a great movie about it
with Affleck.
Yeah.
That great scene where that kid shows up at like a public event, and he's brought his dad's gun with him, and he's pointing it at Superman, and that he has to like talk him out of shooting him.
He wants to see the bullet bounce off his chest.
Right. That's pretty scary. That's pretty scary.
Yeah. I think it's Hollywoodland was the name of that movie.
That sounds right.
Do you have a favorite card game? Like if you're going to sit down and play something?
Well, it'd be bridge.
Is it bridge?
Yeah, we still get together, friends, and it's anybody who plays cards. Ultimately, probably the vast majority of them would say that bridge is their favorite.
I carry a cribbage board in my car at all times, just in case.
I'll play cribbage, but boy, I'm not. Yeah, I don't seem to have much luck at it. So.
Oh yeah, good. Then you can play me because I love to win.
I like Pinochle. Pinocle's fun.
So do I. In fact, I miss the days. My parents used to tell me about how it was like Thursday night at Duffy's was Pinochle night, and it was just stacks and stacks of cards over there.
I remember, I think on Saturdays, playing in Pinochle tournaments at Duffy's.
Sure.
At Duffy's, at the American Legion in Moorhead. Jack Sunday and I went down to play a couple of times. We went to Lemoore once and to Rutland once to play in Pinochle tournaments. We had this distinction, sit and you play 4 hands at a table. At one table at that Rutland tournament, Jack and I got all 4 bids and we got set 4 times. You can tie that, but you can't do worse.
And I think one thing I've always wished that my generation would pick up that previous generations really enjoyed was the idea of putting a record on and just sitting and listening to it as a group. I think for my generation, listening to anything uninterrupted is a very singular solo experience.
We friends, we'd get together and I used to do my schedule for years. At Channel 4, doing the weather was I'd do the noon show, I'd do the 6 o'clock weather, and the 10 o'clock. Well, I'd have long break in the afternoon, and I'd go home. Well, I had buddies come over, and we'd listen to. Did either of you know Jeff Petrick? Mm-hmm. Oh, anyway, he was a marvelous guy, and anyway, he and other friends, we'd get together and listen to like Frank Zappa. We were all Zappa-philes. And, we'd toke up, and which was...
Yeah, you'd really get into the music, right?
And like you say, you'd listen to things together and be fascinated by lyrics and all. And, everybody's now into their own little head pods, huh? Yeah.
I think it's very disappointing. And it's also disappointing when, we've got all these devices and people can't just immerse themselves in one thing and be totally present in that one thing for a while.
At the same time, though, it's also a part of the groundswell of popularity with podcasts like this one right now. In like the podcasts that I listen to are just like this one, where they're long form conversational, because I like having some media to consume that's slow, that's not showing me an image every 5 seconds to try to capture my attention, something that I can be listening to passively and do my own thing and know that, if it's a 2 to 3 hour Joe Rogan podcast, I'm like, I'll listen to it until I'm sick of listening to it. And if I want to, I'll just keep going. And then I'm getting stimulating conversation at the same time. So I think that you go too far, and then there's sort of the correction with people over time, hopefully, and I think podcasting is part of that.
Something here, just to digress, because I stopped to think to myself, what day is this? And I remember that it's Sunday. That's one thing I've noticed is I have more and more difficulty remembering what day it is. I made this mistake. This was back before I started working in the schools, because I had a period there where I had more free time on my hands than I needed. And my wife, who was full-time managing the flower shop out at Northport Hornbachers, I made the stupid mistake of saying, "Is this Wednesday or Thursday?" To which Sue said, "I hate you."
Damn.
Oh, but once I was working more again, doing this, I don't think Sue had any problem, because then I've noticed more recently, and she retired. She turned 65 in the middle of February and wrapped up working at the end of February. And she's had trouble remembering what day of the week it is. I've been out on bike rides with my good friend Gordy Richardson. He used to run the VIP room. I don't know if you'd know him. Anyway, we're riding. I think we'd ridden out to the airport and back. And I says, geez, I said, I forgot what day it is. And I says, I thought it was Sunday, but actually it's Monday. And he says, no, it's neither. God. I mean, it really,
Yeah.
it's
I think
hilarious.
you worry when it's like, is it March or?
Well, see, today, woke up and there's a cat. We have a cat. And early in the morning, it'll start meowing to be fed. And you let it go for a while, and finally I looked, and clock said 6:26, and this is Sunday. I got to get up to get ready for investment talk, because some of the prep for that happens just the same morning. But then I got to feed the cat and get going, and Sundays with that early start, there'll be sometimes, and I took a healthy, I think about a 14-mile bike ride with Gordy earlier. And who knows what else. Sometimes later in the day or evening, I think, Jesus, these Sundays are long. And not in a bad way. It's just like, it seems like that was a long time ago this morning. And yet, the days, the weeks, the months go by so fast. I've noticed it's like every month goes faster than the month before. Does that happen for you? You guys are young men yet.
Oh no, I think absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
That's only going to increase.
always upon reflection, never in the moment. In the moment, things always feel like it's going at a snail's pace for
Yeah.
me. But then once it's done, it's like, God, that was quick.
This episode is we're bordering on our 140th episode of this show.
Getting close.
So, and most of them are over an hour long. So we've put together probably 175 plus hours of content like this. But it seems like we just started the show yesterday.
Right.
And which is neat, because it must mean that we're passionate, we're having a great time. But there are days where I will look at a clock twice and be like, I think that a minute went by, but it felt like an hour and a half.
And that must be a attention span issue that our generations and after us will be experiencing. Like, I don't hear my parents ever talking like that, ever. And I wonder how much of that is the fact that we are so habituated to being able to entertain ourselves every few seconds. So I actually, when I get the chance to take the time to put my phone down, and it's hard for the first like 20 minutes, but I eventually achieve oh, that's right. That's what it feels like to not have anxiety constantly. That's what it feels like to not have a brain that's racing and causing me suffering in the moment. And, maybe a 14-mile bike ride helps do that too, because you can't really pick your phone up and look at it while you're
But
doing
yet
it.
we each have our phones along, and Gordy will say, for instance, "Oh, can we stop?" Saying, he says, "I'm getting a text," and I'll do the same thing but doesn't happen But we chat a lot as we go along. We go at a pretty leisurely pace for the most part.
You're looking in super shape. So how often are you going bike riding?
Well, I also most days, but I also go over to Quartz Plus on a very regular basis. I have for years, and if I go there, I can multitask because I can do a cross trainer while reading, or it's because that makes the tedium of that exercise go by, and you're doing something. But even better than that is somebody I know, a friend, gets on a machine next to me, and we chat away much of that hour. Then that's the best of all.
See, my problem is that when I try and chat with someone while I'm on a treadmill or an elliptical, it's a lot of kids.
Well, a cross trainer isn't going to, unless you're really going to add and want it, you can set it for, the resistance and the ramp angle.
I took a break while coming up the stairs to the studio today, Steve.
I'll tell you.
You're also recovering from food poisoning.
I'll
though,
tell you
JJ.
one that'll really get to you in a hurry, and that's stair climbing machines. Oh man,
Yeah.
You ever done them? Mm-hmm. I challenged myself to do a half hour, and oh boy, I made it. But boy, it was like a real test of will the last few minutes.
Gives you a new respect for Rocky in the training montage, doesn't it? When he's running up the stairs in front of that university, like.
So it's about 2 years ago, I was in Philadelphia for my previous job, and we went to that staircase to shoot a Rocky parody. And there were like 5 or 6 other people shooting Rocky parodies at the same time on that staircase. And I wonder how often that happens now.
Rocky, the original Rocky, my goodness, does that go all the way back now to?
Isn't it a museum? Isn't it a museum?
77, I think.
I think that's about
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Incredible.
Yeah, so Sylvester Stallone donated a life-size bust of himself. To be placed at the top of this staircase because he's made it so incredibly famous.
It's iconic. Yeah.
And
Yeah, statue for a
You
fake athlete.
I'm not so keen. I loved Rocky, but you know what I'll watch and rewatch is Rambo: First Blood.
Oh yes.
That the sheriff played by Dennehy. But
They drew first blood. They drew first blood. I was really hoping. Well, is the
Last
It is
Blood
called
comes
Last
out
Blood.
this
That's right.
fall,
It
yeah.
is called Last Blood, the next Rambo movie.
wow,
You know, there was a period of time a few years ago where they were talking about another Rambo movie, and at that time, the villains were going to be the KKK. He was going to go to like a small, like swampy town in the South. But now I believe it's the drug cartel, Mexican drug cartel he's fighting in this one. And he's shorn his locks, so he does not have the long hair. It's modern day Expendables Sylvester Stallone.
on the name Rambo, there was a French poet. Jim Morrison was fond of his name was. It's Rimbaud, and that pronunciation in French is Rambo. And I'm wondering whether or not Stallone, in choosing the name Rambo, whether there was some connection to some appreciation for that French poet Rambo.
Well, so he wrote and created Rocky, but did he do the same thing for First Blood, or did he just get hired into it?
I think that he was a script doctor.
He was.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's an incredibly intelligent man. It's funny because he plays these action meathead roles, but he's a very smart dude.
And yeah, financially, I mean, that was the deal. He wrote Rocky, and people were ready to buy the property, but he says, "No, I'm doing the role.
Yep.
That's the only way." And there it went, And so I'm sure with anything, with the incredible success of that, he's going to have a lot of power in terms of choosing other properties or his own things to do, because that's all Hollywood. Hey, that looks like it'll make money, and they'll throw it there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad he gave up his comedy career because
I didn't know he had one.
Oh,
You mean
he
like Stop
Stop
or
or
My Mom Will Shoot?
Yep. He had a couple of those movies where he was trying to capture the energy of these action stars doing these more comedic
He was doing it at the
roles.
same time as Schwarzenegger was doing Kindergarten Cop and other such.
Yeah, I mean Hulk
movies.
Hogan did Suburban Commando and Mr. Nanny or whatever it
Mr.
was.
Nanny. That's right.
So I think there were a lot of them who wanted to get into that era, but Steve, as we get ready to wrap this thing up, thank you so much for coming in and being our guest today.
Well, you make it so easy. It's just been fun to converse with friends.
Isn't it nice where you don't have to get to a commercial break and it's nice like that. One thing I want to for sure compliment you on is you used to have one of the best mustaches in Fargo Moorhead. And when you watch old footage of you from
You're thinking of that Charlie Johnson clip,
I
aren't
am,
you?
yeah. Specifically, do you know how popular that clip is online?
You mean where I expressed my disappointment about Charlie Johnson no longer being at Channel 4?
Yep.
That lives on, huh?
Oh man, so much so. And then at one point you spoke to a mass media class that my wife took when she was in college. And she, like, even today when I said, well, I'm interviewing Steve Poitras today, she's like, oh my God, you're interviewing Steve Poitras. And I'm like, yep. And guess what? He's been to our house before. What? He's what?
That's right. Because so in 2005, we made a movie called Mercedes Ray versus the former presidents of the United States.
I was Martin Van Buren.
Oh, and you killed it too. You were awesome.
That was wild. What a collection of great people that were playing the presidents.
Oh my goodness, that was so much fun. And JJ was Taft.
Yeah, I still think that Dave Scheer was the spitting image of Carter.
Right.
I mean, it was amazing.
And Hank K. Truck as Ulysses S. Grant.
In
was
regard
fantastic.
to that mustache, I had worn it pretty much continually from when I was in the Army in '69. Your own little ray of, after basic training, you were allowed, no beards, of course, but you could grow a mustache. So I grew that, and I guess I had that up until 1988 when Dr. Hansen over at Moritz State invited me to reprise the role of Pseudolus. And funny thing happened on the way to the forum that I had played as an undergraduate when I was 20, still in Weld Hall. It was the last regular season musical ever done on the stage at Weld Hall before then they moved over to the Center for the Arts. Well, anyway, he invited me back. Okay, great. And I took some vacation time away from the station to be able to rehearse for only about 10 or 11 days. And Dr. Hansen says, play a role, you got to take the mustache off. And I understood. So I shaved it off. And after we did it, and it was great fun and all, I grew the mustache back. But I had developed this bad habit of biting and picking at it, sticking it into my... And I thought, I'm ending up making it scraggly. And so I took it off, and I've left it off. So I really haven't had it since sometime later in 1988. I do grow sort of a vestige of it on my left buttock.
That's a weird evolutionary trait right there.
And I think that's the perfect place to end the podcast. Thanks again, Steve.
Thank you very much. This has been great fun.
A huge thanks to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty for sponsoring this podcast. Folks, if you're looking to buy or sell a home, contact Natalie Deutsch today, because Natalie Deutsch is not only a previous podcast guest, she's somebody who's going to care enough to sell your property for top dollar. She's also going to find you the best price possible if you're purchasing a new home. Last year, on average, Natalie earned her clients $4,000 over list price on their homes and sold them faster than the market average. On average, Natalie's selling a home every 3.74 days. That's 2 homes a week. Those numbers don't lie. Find out why Natalie is one of the top agents in this entire market. Get a hold of her today, Natalie at hatchrealtyfm.com. You can also call 701-388-9338 or go on to livefargomoorhead.com. That's livefargomoorhead.com. Read all of her amazing reviews and then listen to her episode of JJ Meets World. Thanks again to Natalie Deutsch of Hatch Realty. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode of JJ Meets World and would like to help us continue to produce 2 new episodes every week, you can donate to our Patreon. Check out patreon.com/JJ Meets World and donate today. Even as little as $1 a month can go a long way. Visit our website at www.jjmeetsworld.com or hit up our social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the sites the kids are using these days. If you'd like to stay up to date on new episodes of JJ Meets World, you can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, YouTube, or wherever you consume the podcast that you love. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by checking out www.moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, go to linebenders.com, and you can find direct contact info for JJ. One time, Steve Poitras big-timed me, pretending he didn't know who I was when I was running for mayor, and I went up to him at an event, and looking back on it, I don't blame him at all. I would have probably done the same thing to me, too.